Very good morning, students. Yesterday we have seen the three stages of the relationship between the author and his grandmother. What are those three stages? The first one, the childhood memories of the author with his grandmother. When the author was too young, when he was a young boy, grandmother was the only one person who used to do everything for the author. She used to cook for the author. They both were going to school together. After returning from the school, they used to feed the street dogs. But from there, when they shifted to the city life, the second stage of the relationship between the author and his grandmother, when the author started to go to the English school, the grandmother was not able to accompany him to the school because the author used to travel in a motor bus. Even though they were staying in a same room, the communication between the author and the grandmother was very less. She was engaged with the feeding of sparrows, and the grandmother was not much happy with the studies of the author because he was studying the scientific subjects and the music as well, where the grandmother was expecting the author should study about the God and the religious aspects. But when the story moved from there to the third stage, which is the third stage when the author moved to the university, from there he is moving to abroad for his further studies, and the author is returning from overseas. Here we can see when the author returned from the overseas, the grandmother was there to welcoming him. Then also she didn't spoke much to the author, where the author was very unhappy. The author was expecting a very warm welcome, a very emotional welcome from the grandmother's side, but it didn't happen. Now we'll see the further developments of the story. Dear students, now we are going to read the chapter. In the evening, a change came over her. She did not pray. She collected the woman from neighborhood, got an old drum and started to sing. For several hours, she thumped the sagging skin of the dilapidated drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. We had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstraining. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. The next morning, she was taken ill. It was a mild fever, and the doctor told us it would go. But the grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life, she had omitted to pray, she was not going to waste any more time talking to us. Here, dear students, we can in this paragraph. The author says a sudden change happened to her, even though she didn't spoke much to the author. On the same evening, she collected the women from the neighborhood and she started to sing. She started to sing the songs of the homecoming warriors. From this sentence, we can feel the emotion of the grandmother towards the author. She sang the song of home returning warriors for several hours. As a result of this, the very next morning she was taken ill. The doctor said that it was a mild fever and it would go. But what was the concept of the grandmother? She was totally against to these findings of the doctor because she might recognized her last moments in this world is approaching. She decided to keep praying. She decided to be more spiritual, more attached to the God. And she avoided to avoided talking to the other members in the family. The complete day she spent on pray. We protest, but she ignored our protests. She laid peacefully in bed, praying and telling her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving, and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pallor spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. We lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shawl. After a few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude structure to take her to be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We stopped halfway in the courtyard, all over the veranda, and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and still wrapped in the red shower. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirping. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fed some bread for them. She broke it into little crumbs, the way my grandmother used to do, and threw it to them. Sparrows took no notice of the bread. When, when we carried my grandmother's scraps off, they flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the bread crumbs into the dustbin. Here, the last paragraph, dear students, we can see the final moments of the grandmother. How did she spend her final moments? She was praying. When we came to know, or when the author came to know and his family, the grandmother is dead. The rosary fallen down from her lifeless fingers. Very sad moments. The author was very disappointed. He was very sad. The author and his family they moved for the arrangements of the funeral. When they came back, what they have seen? They have seen in the room, in the courtyard, thousands of sparrows were there. The family members, the mother felt very sorry to the little birds. She has taken few breads and made little pieces and given to the sparrows. But they didn't notice the little pieces of the breads. Within no time, the sparrows flew away from the home. Dear students, here the story end. In this story, the author tells a unique relationship with, or the unique relationship of a grandchild and a grandmother. As we have discussed, three different stages of the relationship. Dear students, now we move to the understanding the test. The three phases of the author's relationship with his grandmother before he left the country to study abroad. This we have already discussed that what are the three phases of the relationship between the grandmother and the author. The first one, when the author was very young, how did he spend the time with his grandmother? The second one, the author moved to an English medium school. And the third one, where the author is leaving the country and moving to the overseas. Three reasons why the author's grandmother was disturbed when he started going to the city school. We can see many reasons in the story. First one, we can see when the author moved to the English medium school. Before that, the grandmother and the author they used to move together to the school. But after moving to the English medium school, the English school, author started to travel in a motor bus where the grandmother is not able to accompany him to the school. And the author very clearly says the second reason, there was no street dogs, because the grandmother and the author they used to feed the street dogs in the village, but in the city there was no street dogs for feeding. Instead of feeding the street dogs, grandmother started to feed the sparrows. Then the another reason that we can say, the grandmother was very much disappointed regarding the studies of the author. When the author is returning after the school, the grandmother is asking to him, what did the teacher teach you in the day? The author says, she taught me English, science, and other scientific subjects. But according to the grandmother, the author should learn about the religion and about the God. From there, when we move to the another part, after a few days, when the author said to the grandmother, in the school, the author is studying music. Grandmother was totally against the music. The grandmother says music is not meant for the general folk. When we move to the another question, three ways which the author's grandmother spent her days after he grew up. The grandmother, she used to feed the sparrows. Most of the time, she used to pray with the rosary. When we move to the fourth question, the odd way in which the author's grandmother behaved just before she died. What is the odd way? How did the grandmother behaved? When the author returned from abroad, from overseas, even though the grandmother didn't speak to him much, later the grandmother collected all the women. They gathered together and they sang the song of home returning warriors. And in the end of the story, we have seen the grandmother, she refused to talk to the members in the family. When we move to the fifth question, the way in which the sparrows express their sorrow when sorrow when the author's grandmother died. Here, this is the most heart-touching moment in the story. Here we can see after the death of the grandmother, the sparrows gathered together. When the author's mother has given the bread pieces to the sparrows, even they didn't notice. They just flew away from there. These are the very important questions that we have discussed.